And welcome into the Friday edition of Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Robbie Stanley alongside Adam Vingan and Nick Keyser here with you on this Friday morning. Joe Rexrode is gallivanting off to Las Vegas. I think he's checking out a U2 concert. I assume that's in the Sphere, but I don't know that.
It is.
I assume that's where it is, so we'll have to get a full report from Rexrode. But Adam Vingan is with us all show long today. Adam, good morning. How are you?
Good. It's been a minute. Glad to be here. Yes. I'm excited to fill in for Rexrode.
Yes.
While he heads off to Las Vegas. Yes. U2 is doing a residency at the Sphere. I've heard a lot about the Sphere. If you consumed any Super Bowl coverage, you heard a lot about the Sphere and all of the sports writers going to the Sphere. So
I don't know what the relationship is between U2 and Creed, but if there was ever a time for Scott Stapp to make a guest appearance, it would be this weekend.
Well,
Joe Rexrode
my dad is going to a series of shows at the Sphere next month, I believe. No, sorry, in the summertime. Dead and Company.
Okay.
You know, the Grateful Dead plus John Mayer
yeah.
are doing a set of shows at the Sphere. So he got his tickets, very excited. So I've been hearing a lot about the Sphere lately. So I look forward to Joe's report once he returns from Las Vegas.
Yep, me too. He should be back on Tuesday. So
should
Joey? Well,
he should be
I say
back
that
on
because
Tuesday?
you know
he's not going to make it back.
Him in Vegas, you never know what could happen. So
he's going to end up on the Cirque du Soleil show somewhere.
Yeah, like they've made movies about this. He could be Hangover 4. We'll see what happens. Nick Keyser, good morning. How we doing?
Good morning. I'm doing well. A few hours of sleep. Robbie and I are back at it this morning. Yes, but Rexrode is not with us. He's taking in Vegas. Good for him, I guess. His kids are going to Florida.
He said, I guess.
So, yeah. Joe's been all over me lately. So,
you're good. You're happy to see him gone?
Well, I'm okay with it.
Wow. Jeez.
I'm okay with it.
You're okay with Rexrode being gone for a couple days. This is fun.
Yeah.
These are just throwing it out there. I like it. Thank you very much.
You miss a little, you miss a lot around here, I guess.
Right.
Are you and Joe at odds?
Yeah, are you beefing?
No, I don't think so. No. But I'm waiting for him to say where we're going to have lunch.
Okay, well, you do. He does need to figure that out.
Yeah.
We got a lot to get to on the program today. Jared Stillman will join us at 7 o'clock, so always fun when Stilly joins the program. We'll get into that next hour. Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter, host of Talking with TD, will join us as he does every Friday morning at 8 o'clock. We'll get into all things Tennessee Titans with him. We begin with the Nashville Predators and an absolute debacle last night at Bridgestone Arena. They get beaten 9-2 by the Dallas Stars. And, you know, I'm not being hyperbolic when I say this, Adam. The first period of last night's game was the single worst first period I think I've ever seen them play. And I've seen them play a lot of hockey. I have been watching this team since the moment they came here in 1998. And I've seen them play a lot, and that was the worst one I think I've ever seen. They were down 4-0 after the first period last night, and they were outshot 18-1 in the first period. That's hard to do. They barely had the puck. When they did have the puck, they didn't generate anything offensively, and Dallas had 4 end up in the back of the Preds net last night. And they probably, in all seriousness, in the first period, they probably could have had 6 or 7. And it was just brutal from start to finish. It began 35 seconds in with a goal by Sam Steele. Matt Duchene scored, and we're going to get into the Duchene part of this a little bit later in the show. But it was brutal last night. And I said yesterday on the show, you know, it's been a heck of a week for the Predators. Monday, practice apparently goes very poorly, and Andrew Burnett's, you know, skating them all over the ice and backskating them, and was pretty vocal after the practice about his displeasure with the team. Tuesday they come out, and the score was 4-2. That score was much closer than the actual game was. They got their pants beat off by the New Jersey Devils, and they talked about it after the game. Roman Josi was very mad, and they were talking about the lack of effort and getting beat to every puck and all those things. So you thought about, like, okay, after that game, you would assume there's some sort of response by the Predators, and that was not the response you were looking for yesterday, 9-2 at the hands of the Dallas Stars. So I said it yesterday. the Predators should be sellers. I don't think that's breaking news, but they're making Barry Trotz's job this week pretty darn easy to come to that conclusion.
If you were in attendance at last night's game, congratulations, you witnessed the worst home loss in Predators history. And I'm not, and to borrow your term, Robby, I'm not being hyperbolic. The 9 goals against, the most the Predators have allowed in a home game in their history, the 7-goal margin of defeat, the largest goal differential in a Predators loss at home in their history. So, actual fact, that was the worst home loss in Nashville Predators history last night. And I did not catch the full game, but I checked the score early on, and I saw it was 4-0 late in the first period, and I thought my NHL app had maybe had a typo or something. But I agree with you, Robby. I heard what you said the other day. I think it's abundantly clear that this team is not anywhere close to competing. And look, I understand when I say that. Barry Trotz and Andrew Brunette tempered expectations, specifically Barry Trotz, tempered expectations about what this team could be.
Yeah.
They were not expecting this they were not expecting this team to be a Stanley Cup contender this season. So that I understand. But they did put together a team that they expected to compete for the playoffs, which I, quite frankly, as we talked about over the summer, never really understood. I never really understood the point of trying to make the playoffs with this team. I think over the past few years, at the end of David Poyle's time with the Predators, what did we complain about? Him trying to get a team that clearly wasn't a Stanley Cup contender and force them into the playoffs by any means necessary.
Yeah.
And it just never made sense to me for this team at this stage of to be trying to get into the playoffs. So I think the good news in that respect is it's clear that this team is not ready. Clearly, you cannot hang with the upper echelon of the Western Conference, be it Dallas, Vegas, Vancouver, Edmonton. It's just not going to happen. So, they had an opportunity. I just pulled this up, and their past 11 games, they've lost 8 of 11.
Yep.
They're 3-7-1 in their past 11 games. They've been outscored in those 11 games, 43-24. So they're averaging just above 2 goals a game and allowing nearly 4 goals a game over that stretch. So I think last night was the final blow to any possibility that this team is going to compete for the playoffs. They're going on a 5-game road trip. They're going to play some tough teams. I mean, St. Louis has won 8 of 10.
Yep.
They play them tomorrow. I think they play Vegas on this trip as well. I think it could get ugly. I do think we'll talk about this. I'll have a call your shot related to this later.
Oh boy.
I think it could get ugly in the next week. If it has, it's already pretty ugly.
Well, it's not going to get much uglier than it was last night. There's no question about that. But I hear what you're saying over a sustained period of time. And Andrew Brunette, as we've talked about here on the show, has not been afraid to voice his opinion on what he's seen out there, and he's not happy again after the game last night. Here's what Andrew Brunette had to say after the 9-2 loss.
Well, it's disappointing. I think it can only be addressed so many times. Either we're not taking it serious enough or we're not understanding. So the response and the mindset is really disappointing.
So that was Andrew Brunette after the game last night. And the one part of this, look, there's a couple things here that drive me a little bit nuts. Number one, I started, people started talking to me about, Andrew Brunette, should he be on the hot seat last night? And I was like, guys, can we please get through one season before we start talking about a coach being on the hot seat? I mean, the guy was just hired. We just went through a coach firing process here. So I'm honestly not going to give that one a whole lot of oxygen because it's stupid and it's not going to happen. So there's no point in talking about it. I will say, though, to your point, going back to the construction of this team. So you moved Ryan Johansson out of here. You moved Matt Duchene out of here, and we're going to get to that a little bit later. But you brought in Ryan O'Reilly. You already had McDonough here, who's been very successful everywhere he's been. Gus Nyquist, I think, has been very good for the Predators for the most part this year, and he's been a veteran player that's very reliable. Luke Shen, on the ice, not that great, but the leadership part of it, I guess I understood that part. So the point, at least it seems to me, of bringing in these guys was not only to what you said, to try to make the playoffs and to get a lineup to complement some of the veteran pieces that were already here. But what do we hear all about, right? It was the culture, and it was the winning part of this, and serial winners, and guys who do things the right way, which I understand. So I guess my question is, and look, I've seen Ryan O'Reilly. The guy is, people throw the cliche first one on, last one off around all the time. That's what that guy is. Like, it's what he is. Look, being around Ryan McDonough, it's pretty easy to see why he's been successful everywhere he's been. So I guess I'm trying to figure out why is there a disconnect between those guys, what we just talked about, of the culture pieces and the serial winners and the attitude required to win games and to bring consistent effort on a nightly basis. Why is there a disconnect between that and what we've seen this week, which is, by really everyone's admission over there, just being a total no-show for 2 games in a row at this time of year?
It's a good question because, just as you said, the reason why Barry Trotz, paid up for Ryan O'Reilly and Luke Shen, and as you said, they already had Ryan McDonough in the room and already Roman Josi, Philip Forsberg. They have those leaders to complement the younger players that they're trying to shepherd into the league, and those players really shouldn't allow something like this to happen. Now, I'm not in the dressing room anymore, so I can't speak to the dynamic there. The two of you can, but it is an interesting point. Really, the most impressive part about this season for me, because the Predators have shown some signs of improvement. If you look, if you look under the surface, they have shown some signs of improvement from last season in terms of some of the things that they've been able to do. But the most impressive part of this season to me is the fact that the Predators were still in conversation for a playoff spot with UC Saros playing like a below league average goaltender.
Agreed.
That is the most impressive part of this season to me, and I'm sure we'll talk about Saros at some point today. This season certainly feels like a transitional year. I think what you should see, even leading into the trade deadline in a couple of weeks, and then I'm sure in the offseason as well, is I think Barry Trotz, similarly to what he did last summer, when he bought out Matt Duchene and traded Ryan Johansson. I think you're going to see Barry Trotz really start to weed out some of these other players.
I agree.
I think this was a transitional year in that regard. I think some Predators players that you have known and loved, potentially loved, you might hate them, who knows, for the past however many years, I could see some of them being shown the door. I think the mix in that dressing room from afar, keyword for me, from afar, does not seem right. I think it's on the right track based on the players they've brought in, but something clearly seems to, as you said, there to be a disconnect.
Well, and again, people are asking about the coach, and I guess the question I need to throw out there is this: like, what's more likely? They keep bringing in the wrong coaches over and over and over and over and over again, or the locker room needs to be shaken up? You tell me. We just went through this where everybody wanted to blame John Hines for all the Predators' problems, and oh my gosh, John Hines is the worst coach ever. John Hines can't do this. John Hines can't do that. And I tried to tell you, it's not just John Hines. Was it time to fire John Hines? Yes, it was time to move on from John Hines. But I've tried to tell you for 3 years that it's not just the coach. There's a big problem with this roster. And now here we are again with things falling apart, and everybody wants to blame a coach. At what point are we going to stop blaming the coach and look around and trying to shake things up around here? That would be the question that I would ask. We can't just... it's the coach. It's the coach. It's the coach. At some point, we got to stop blaming the coach. There's a new coach in here now. Is that not fair?
I honestly I don't know why you should even have to explain that. But
it's ridiculous.
I know
the amount of people asking me about the coach last night made me want to take my laptop and chuck it in center ice.
That would have been an impressive feat, more impressive than what they did on the ice last night.
It's just let's have some common sense here, people. 615-737-1025, our phone number. 615-737-1025. Preds get hammered last night 9-2 against the Dallas Stars. More of your reaction to that coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game. Tune in to 102.5 The Game. Today as Vanderbilt baseball season begins. Vandy taking on FAU over at Hawkins Field with pregame beginning at 12:45. First pitch at 1 o'clock. Coverage also available on the 102.5 The Game app and at thegamenashville.com. Welcome back in. Robbie Stanley, Adam Vingan, Nick Keyser here with you on this Friday morning. Preds get beat 9-2 last night. And as we pointed out, the worst home loss in the history of the franchise. Not very good last night, and it's hard to imagine it getting a whole lot worse than that one. I mean, it was just everything that could possibly go right for the Stars last night did, and mostly everything that went wrong could go wrong for the Predators did. I mean, it's a total no-show in the first period. Get outshot 18-1, down 4-0. Just brutal last night from the Predators. Taking your thoughts on that, 615-737-1025. Let's go to our 1025 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in the other Adam in Portland. Adam, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, what's up, fellas? What's up, Adam? Hey, so check this out, man. I'm sitting there last night. I'm playing cards, Robby, and at a place, and I'm asking them. I'm like, hey, can you put the Preds game on? Can you put the Preds game on? I asked this dude like 3 times. By the time they finally got it on, I was like, they were all like, whoa, what did you want to see this for? It's 18-1 outshot, which is more important than the 4-0 because, you know, the scores can be misleading. That was not misleading. That was so, I mean, dude, I was like, at least it's in Dallas because I didn't recognize the logo. And then I'm like, oh, my God, it's at home. You know, so I don't know if heads got to roll, dude. I don't want to be too dramatic like somebody has to be fired, but that's the worst period of hockey I've ever seen before. Like, I don't sit through games that don't mean something to me in hockey. I just can't do it. I can't make myself. That's the worst period of hockey I've ever seen before. So I don't know, dude. Especially Duchesne, like coming back and just pouring salt in the wounds. Like, what's going to happen next, dude? You know, like that's my question. Is like something has to happen, right? Like that tilted it. We wanted to know which way they were going to tilt. I think that tilted it, bud.
Yeah, thanks for the call, Adam. Appreciate it. Well, to his last point there. One thing to me is pretty clear, and I don't know that Barry Trotz is just going to come out and say this anytime soon, but he's talked about kind of the next 2 weeks coming out of the break here, determining where they're going at the deadline. And to me, the way this week has gone, that decision is pretty easy. Like it's one thing to get shelled by the Devils and get beat to every puck, as they talked about after the game. But to have zero response from that and to come out and just get embarrassed the way you did last night, even if the Predators go on like a little run here, like there's no way you can buy if you're Barry Trotz. So I think the decision needs to be pretty clear, and I said it yesterday on Twitter, and I'll say it again here. You know, they got a big game coming up tomorrow against St. Louis. If you win that, you're going to be right back in the mix in terms of a playoff spot. Sometimes you got to keep the long-term picture in mind and sacrifice the short-term gain. And I think the Predators are definitely in that spot right now, and they need to sell. There's no doubt about that.
And by the way, the Blues, who won last night, they didn't just beat anybody. They beat the Oilers last night.
They did.
And they beat them 6-3.
Which is hard to do.
So that's incredibly impressive. But I think one thing that Predators fans need to keep in mind when we talk about sell. Last season, the Predators had multiple valuable players.
They did.
They had Nino Niederreiter. They had Matthias Ekholm. I mean, Tanner Jeannot was worth a bounty of picks. Even Mikael Granlund
traded Granlund.
Yeah, picked up a second-round pick from the Penguins, which is still ridiculous to think about. But anyway, comparatively, the Predators don't really have a ton that people want, I would say. Now, you know, Tyson Barrie obviously made his interest in going elsewhere known, but he hasn't been great this year.
No.
I mean, maybe you can get a late round pick for him or something like that.
Well, the big one's Saros, right?
Yeah,
right. That's what it is.
Right. So my point is, if you're looking at you're not looking at a sell off where you're going to get a lot back unless you trade Saros. But by the way, Saros has not been good this season.
Yeah.
The time to trade Saros was last summer, when he was at his peak. And then I pulled these numbers during the break just to give you a sense of how bad UC Saros has been compared to last season. So last season, UC Saros saved an extra 25.9 goals.
Yeah.
Based on the quality of shot that he faced when in net, he saved nearly 26 more goals than he should have. That was the top number in the league last season. This season, he has allowed 5.26 more goals than he should have. That's a swing of nearly 30 goals.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not been good.
No.
And look, his body of work over the past few years, this season notwithstanding, suggests that he's a great goalie. We know that. But trading him now, you're trading him at his lowest value. And I don't think it's an issue of, and Robby, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, I don't think it's an issue of the team doesn't play defense in front of him, because
most of the time,
the underlying numbers suggest they've actually been better at playing defense in front of him. Not like significantly better,
right?
But they're not just letting teams walk in and have open looks at UC Saros on a regular basis. He has just been bad this year.
Right. Now, last night, I would say there was a lot of letting him walk in. But to your point, yes, the overall picture, I don't think there's any doubt. Let's go to our 1025 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in Ricky. Ricky, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, guys. How are you?
Good.
I was at the Jersey Devil game last night against the Kings. I was covering it, and the talk in the press box is maybe Trotz waited a little too long with Saros, actually. The talk around everybody up there was about Saros to the Devils, except now that Markstrom's become available with Calgary, might be a little bit more attractive. As you were just saying, he's the hotter goalie this year of the two. But they were talking about if a deal would go down with the Devils, the hardest part would be that both the Devils' top prospects are right-handed shooting defensemen. And they don't really wants to come back and say, hey, we got a 19-year-old defenseman and a couple picks for Saros. So they were saying the only way the deal might happen with New Jersey is around Dawson Mercer, a gentleman named Casey. He's a right-handed shot, 19-year-old defenseman, 6'1", good puck-moving guy, and a ton of draft picks. I just don't think it's worth it to the fan base here to turn around and say, hey, we got a bunch of draft picks for our best player again and see what happens. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not.
Yep, thanks for the call, Ricky. Appreciate it. I mean, look, if that's the haul they got, I think you'd be happy with that if you're Barry Trotz. So when all those players that he mentioned, right? I
mean, we shared this with each other yesterday, and Jared talked about it on his show yesterday too. Ryan Dixon from Sportsnet wrote a mock trade story.
Yeah,
and the mock trade that he had was UC Saros and Alex Carrier with 50% of Carrier's salary retained to New Jersey for Dawson Mercer, a 2025 first-round pick, like top 5 protected or something. Both of their goalies, Vitek Vanacek and Akira Schmid, and Seamus Casey, the prospect that the caller just mentioned. And, I was talking about it with Jared before his show. He's like, what did you think of that? And I said, honestly, the framework of that deal isn't terrible.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if maybe you need both goalies to make the money work. I mean, Vanacek arguably has been the worst starting goaltender in the NHL this year. And Schmid is fine. He's young. Had a really good first-round series last year against the Rangers, if I recall correctly. But basically the idea of getting a first-round pick, and a young NHL-tested player like Dawson Mercer, who scored nearly 30 goals last season, and the top prospect, The Athletic had Seamus Casey ranked as the Devils' second-best prospect, and they had the Devils' system as the 22nd best system out of 32 teams. So if you're getting a team's second-best prospect, a young NHL-experienced player, and a first-round pick, honestly, that in itself would not be terrible. I don't
think you're getting a whole lot more than that.
I mean,
I think there's this idea for that UC Saros is going to generate like this massive return.
Well, there's no precedent.
I just don't think that's the case.
There's no recent precedent for a goalie trade. There was a lot of talk over the summer before they re-signed him to a long-term contract, which looks like a great idea right now. Connor Hellebuck. If Connor Hellebuck had been traded from the Winnipeg Jets, that would have been your comparable.
Yeah.
Because Saros and Hellebuck, I would say are on a pretty level playing field in terms of their ability, but that didn't happen. So you don't have that. So if you end up with a trade that's basically a first round pick, a team's second best prospect, and a NHL ready player, young player like Dawson Mercer, I think that's the best that you can hope for.
We'll take more of your thoughts on the Preds. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. 615-737-1025. Get to your calls and texts coming up next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Adam Vingan, Nick Keyser here with you on this Friday morning. Preds get beat 9-2 last night at the hands of the Dallas Stars. Taking your thoughts on that. Let's go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in Mike in Gallatin. Mike, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Good morning, guys. I think that I've just been so used to, with Predators teams in the past, having a stalwart defense being, I guess the biggest complaint that we've had is that's all we've had for the better part of the last few years. Like, that's what we've kind of like relied on, is our lockdown defense and our, outstanding plays and Saros. This year, I feel like the defense has not been effective at all. I mean, again, like we want to talk about the goal scoring and everything else like that, but the defense is falling apart. Yossi, in himself, it almost feels like he's trying too hard these days, and it looks like his defensive play is falling off too. How much of that is just not positive production from certain players, or is this the new system not having the right players in place? Because, again, I want to give Brunette a chance before we go crazy and lose our minds. But, I just don't know if he has the right players that he needs for the system that he's running, because clearly the defense is not clicking with what the coach is trying to get us to do.
Yeah, thanks for the call, Mike. Appreciate it. Well, let me start with that last part. I can tell you, no, he does not have the right players for the system that he wants to run. Now, Does that mean that you wait to run the system? We were talking about this yesterday. The system is what the system is, right? Andrew Brunette believes in a certain style of play. And look, to your point, Adam, there have been several things that they've done this year that is better and that has been improved over what we've seen last year. Look, Yossi, I thought Yossi was really bad last night. Now, Yossi's not on an island there. There's nobody. It was good for the Predators last night. And let me stress that again. Nobody was good for the Predators last night. So, overall, do I think the defense has been a glaring issue this year? At times. But I also think there's been some stretches this year where they've played really well defensively. And I do think, especially early, when they were 5-10 and they were trying to figure things out, the new system was an adjustment for a lot of these guys, Saros included. I would put Yossi in there because, as you know, Adam, when John Hines was the coach, a lot of the offense was, hey, just get the puck to Roman Yossi and let him skate up the middle of the ice and create that way. And Andrew Brunette's system is get the puck to the forwards as quickly as you possibly can and try to generate offense that way, which I like. So, look, the Predators, one thing I think we've learned this week, and we saw it again last night, I think it was highlighted even more in the New Jersey game. They're not as fast, foot speed-wise, as they need to be, right? New Jersey skated circles around them. And that's not, I realize New Jersey, when you start to think about some of the faster teams in the league, New Jersey is up there. So I get that. But the Predators are not, from a foot speed perspective, as quick as they need to be. So obviously that's something that you've got to continue to look at and try to add if you're Barry Trotz as you move forward here. And then I think the most disappointing part of this week, specifically from what we've seen in the New Jersey game and in the Dallas game last night, is they just got pushed around. They got pushed around. They got pushed around in the middle of the ice. They lost most every puck battle. And if you're not going to be an elite talented team, which this team is not, you better work hard and you better put yourself in positions to win some of these battles and to give yourself a fighting chance that way. And that's been what's been disappointing about these last two games is it feels like they've almost mailed it in when things have started to go the wrong way.
I think I'm looking at the lines from last night. And I'm a big Colton Sissons fan. I like Colton Sissons as a player. I like Colton Sissons as a person.
Yep.
He should not be a second-line center on the National Hockey League team.
No.
With
all due respect, he should not.
No. Big Colton Sissons guy. Always was. One of my favorite players to talk to and to cover when I was covering the team. But when you look at this lineup, it's clear that it lacks talent. And I think when the Predators hired Andrew Brunette, there was some of, well, look what he did in Florida. He was great in Florida. Go look at that roster. Go look at the players that Andrew Brunette had in Florida that year.
Right.
there's no Alexander Barkov on this team. There's no Jonathan Huberdeau on this team. There's no Carter Verhaeghe on this team. So I agree with the idea that this roster is sort of like stuck between the players that worked with John Hines and some of the players that could work with Andrew Brunette.
Right.
And I think, I think this coming offseason, it may start at the deadline, but I think this offseason you're going to see the players that were more John Hines players be weeded out.
I think so too.
So I think the caller made a solid point when he said that he doesn't think that Brunette has the types of player, like enough of the type of player that he needs to be successful.
Let's go back to our 102.5 The Game phone line. Welcome in Bob in Antioch. Bob, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Good morning, guys. Was it one of the objectives of this year to sort of see how the younger guys were going to fare on the NHL level, people like Novak and players like that? And now that we're almost 2/3 of the way through the season, how much longer do you think they're going to go with some of those guys, and how long do you think it's going to be before they move them out?
Yep, thanks for the call, Bob. I appreciate it. Well, look, I mean, there's a pretty healthy segment of the fan base right now that looks at Philip Tomasino getting sent down this week and they're throwing their hands up like, what are you doing? And Juuso Parson gets sent down, and what are you doing? Like, why? This is supposed to be about the young guys. And I've said this all year long. Like, I think there's an illusion out there that the Predators are like this really young team. And if you look at their roster, they're not. They're not a really young team. Now, they have some young players, and they have some young players that you're hoping elevate into a role that you can build around moving forward. But again, and going back to what you just said about moving some players out, I think people have got to realize and remember, and I think this applies to some young players too. Like, Barry Trotz did not draft Philip Tomasino. Barry Trotz did not draft Luke Evangelista. And while I'm not saying that he's just going to come in here and clear house of people that he didn't draft, I am saying that I still believe there are going to be some young players that fans were excited about heading into this season that are not going to be on this roster next year. I fully believe that.
When I think about the young players that I was hoping to see more of this season, first of all, I don't consider Tommy Novak a young player. He's almost 27 years old.
Yeah, I don't either.
I know that he's fresh in the league, but he's nearly 27 years old. I don't count Tommy Novak as a young player.
Right.
But I'm thinking of Philip Tomasino, Luke Evangelista, and Juuso Parssinen. And tell me if I'm being too strong here. They've all underwhelmed this season.
I would agree with that.
And the one thing about the Predators, as we all know, is that they do not have a strong track record of developing, high-end forwards. They're great. I don't mean to pick on Colton Sissons again. They're great at developing players like Colton Sissons, who's been a solid, reliable NHL player for several years.
Yep.
But in terms of the high-end players, the ones that make a difference, they do not have a great track record of developing those players. At this point, and this might send some shivers down Predators fans' spines, but we'll use a player who played last night on the opposite team. If one of those young players, Tomasino, Evangelista, or Parson, specifically Evangelista and Tomasino because they play more wing, if one of them becomes Craig Smith, a consistent 20-goal scorer, I think you take it. If that's the best that they become, if Luke Evangelista becomes a 18 to 20 goal scorer every season, 18 to 20 goals, 35 to 40 points, I think you take it. I don't think you can expect one of them to become the next Philip Forsberg. And I just think at this point, especially Tomasino. I mean, I've been particularly disappointed in him this season. But if one of them becomes Craig Smith, and Craig Smith Craig Smith is he's an interesting guy.
He is,
but he was a consistent 20-goal scorer for several years for this team. If that's what you get out of one of these guys, I think you have to take it.
Well, and the bottom line is, like, everybody's looking for that superstar forward, right? And it's hard to find. And I mean, the chances are of the young guys that are currently available to them, chances are they don't have that guy, right? So you have to go figure out a way to get that guy. And that's what Barry Trotz made no secret about that when he took the job. Like, you've got to find a way to get those franchise-changing players.
And there's one surefire way to do that.
There is, and that's not been something that they've been willing to do to this point. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll take more of your thoughts on the Predators coming up next, including a player for the opposing team last night that seemed like he was having a real good time. We'll get into that. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Tune in to 93.3 Classic Hits tomorrow as MTSU basketball takes on UTEP at home. Pre-game beginning at 4:30, tip-off at 5 o'clock. Coverage also available on the 93.3 Classic Hits app and at 93.3classichits.com. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Adam Vingan in for Rexrode today. Talking all things Nashville Predators right now. They could be 9-2 last night at the hands of the Dallas Stars. And one guy that had a lot of fun last night, Adam, Matt Duchene, scoring 2 goals against his former team. So Duchene has had a very good year for the Stars. He's played 53 games. He's got 52 points, 21 goals, 31 assists. He has played largely on a line with Mason Marchment and Tyler Seguin, and that line was awesome last night against the Predators. Duchene scoring a couple of goals last night. First goal he scored, really enjoyed himself after the goal and the celebration. And I can just tell you, from somebody that was around him in the locker room last night, very happy man last night after the Predators got beat 9-2, and he played great against his former team. A lot of Predators fans that I heard from yesterday. I had a conversation with Matt Duchene yesterday morning, and we're going to get to some of those comments here in just a second. But a lot of Predators fans watching the way that he's playing this year and thinking, wonder what that could be like here in our lineup. I caught up with Matt Duchene yesterday morning at Stars Morning Skate and was just talking to him about the buyout for the Predators, the kind of his process of dealing with that, and whether or not Barry Trotz kind of indicated that might be coming. Here's what Matt Duchene had to say yesterday morning to me at Morning Skate.
Yeah, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It was, I've said it many times. I've never cried so much in my life during that period. Just everything. There's a lot going on, a lot family related, and obviously personally. So, it was tough. But fortunately, I had some really great options, and Dallas obviously was, I think they were the first team that called, and they were kind of the last team standing for me, I guess, and. I was just thrilled to join this team.
In your conversations with Barry at the end of last year, did you have a sense that it might be coming, or was it just totally by surprise?
Yeah, 0. Yeah.
So that was Duchene yesterday morning. And look, not that this is some revelatory thing. I mean, you could tell there's some animosity there. And he did his best to downplay it yesterday, both before and after the game. But there's clearly some animosity between Matt Duchene and Barry Trotz and the way that all those things went down. And look, I don't know if that's on the Trotz side of things or not, but Duchene definitely feels it. And Duchene, he talked about it yesterday. He still plans on retiring here, still plans on, living here when his playing career is over with, but he's still kind of processing not being here anymore. And he's playing great, doing a really good job for the Dallas Stars. Do you think it was a mistake for the Predators to buy out the contract of Matt Duchene? Why or why not?
It wasn't a mistake. Because in order for Barry Trotz to put his stamp on this team, he needed to use a term that I used earlier, weed out some of the players in the dressing room. And Matt Duchene, I think Matt Duchene, for the most part, was a productive member of this team for a few years. Got off to a rough start, but obviously had a great season a couple of years ago. Scored 40 goals. There was, when you think about, you mentioned the player that Ryan O'Reilly is. Matt Duchene does not have that same reputation. And I think they needed someone more like Ryan O'Reilly at this stage of the organization than they needed someone like Matt Duchene. When he signed with the Stars, I thought it was a great fit because I think the problem for Duchene here was that he was miscast as a top line forward, like a leader of the forward group.
Agreed.
He has never been that guy. We saw how it worked in Colorado at the start of his career. It's just not the right fit for him. If he is the focal point of your offense, your team isn't balanced. And that's why going to Dallas, I thought, was a smart move by Matt Duchene. Because he was going to be, at best, the 4th best forward on the team. Because he's not better than Robby, he's not better than Jason Robertson, and he's not better than Joe Pavelski.
Yeah.
And, as you said, he's playing on the line with Tyler Seguin, who honestly is very similar to Matt Duchene in a lot of ways. Like, I think that...
And they look great together, by the way.
And Mason Marchment. So that's worked out really well for Matt. I mean, I think this is right. Matt is the leading scorer in terms of points among all players who changed teams in the offseason.
That is correct.
So he's playing. That excludes rookies. So I'm not just veteran players. But I don't think it was the wrong decision. When it happened, I was shocked. I remember, I think we were on the air. I was filling in for Joe then too. I was shocked when that happened. But it made as the dust cleared, it made more sense. I just think that, quite frankly, Matt Duchene was not Barry Trotz, was not a Matt Duchene guy. Like, that's just not what Barry Trotz wanted to instill in the dressing room. Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson were not the right people for that. So it was not a mistake, despite the fact that he's playing incredibly well for the Stars in a secondary role. I don't think it was a mistake.
Well, I said it, and people kind of laughed at it a little bit, and it's worked out, I think, certainly better for Duchene than it has Johansson. But when the Predators traded Johansson to Colorado,
Johansson's having a rough.
He's having a rough year. But that team, the team is still a good team. Now, they're not quite as good as I think they can be. We'll see if they figure that out. But when Duchene got bought out and he signed with Dallas, what did we talk about? We said, I actually think that's a pretty good fit for Matt Duchene for really every reason you just laid out, right? Like, he doesn't have to go to Dallas and be the guy. And look, could Matt Duchene under Andrew Brunette have done something here like he's doing in Dallas this year? I don't know. Maybe. And if so, they could absolutely have used that. The one thing I will say is, and I agree with pretty much everything you said about Duchene in the locker room and Trotz and all those things. The one thing I will say is, from strictly a business perspective, would it make more sense to just have let him play out the rest of the contract rather than taking some of the cap hit and kicking it down the road?
Yeah, you could make
a little while.
You could make that argument for sure. By the way, Ryan Johansson, 9 points in his past 34 games
for
the Colorado Avalanche, and I thought that was going to be a great fit too, because it was for basically the same reasons. Like, Ryan Johansson, the pressure is off. He's going to play behind Nathan McKinnon, who is just a monster.
Yes,
he might win the MVP. Probably should win the MVP, but he's been moved down the lineup. I think he's playing fourth line minutes recently for the Avalanche. It just hasn't been a good year for Ryan Johansson. But I thought the Avalanche were a solid fit for the same reasons I thought that the Stars were a good fit for Duchene. But I understand what you're saying about, was it just, suck it up for a couple more years and then move on. Clearly the fact that the Predators weren't willing to do that tells you what you need to know. But I think if Duchene is relishing in the win last night and scoring, then look, he was basically fired.
Oh, there's no question about it. That's exactly what he was.
Yeah, he was effectively fired. So if he wants to rub it in everybody's faces, hey man,
more power to you.
I'm all about a good revenge tour, man. So if he wants to do this to the Predators for the next couple of years while they're still paying him and he's playing in Dallas, or if he moves on after the season, because I think he only had a 1-year contract with Dallas. But assuming that he gets re-signed and he wants to terrorize the Predators for the next several years while they're paying part of his salary, man, more power to you. I'm not going to fault him for that at all.
Coming up next, we'll be joined by our friend Jared Stillman. We'll get his thoughts on the Predators and the debacle from last night. That's coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Hour 2, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Adam Vingan in today for Rexrode. Nick Keys are here with you on this Friday morning as well. And as we do every Friday morning at 7 o'clock, we welcome in our good friend Jared Stillman to the program, who, by the way, today will be on air from 9 to 11. So make sure you're tuned in for that. Jared, good morning. How are you?
Man, I'm great. You say it every Friday morning. I feel like this is the first Friday morning in like a month that I've been on at 7 o'clock. But I am so happy to be here with you guys, especially with Adam. And I woke up this morning, when my alarm goes off, it's the only alarm that I set is the alarm to set to come on the show. And I got so excited because I just felt like with you two, I'm not going to have to yell and scream. Whereas, in the past, I have been doing a lot of yelling and screaming on this program.
Well, there is some yelling and screaming on the program that has taken place, but a nice, calm, relaxing therapy session for Stillman this morning here on the program. Jared, 9-2 last night.
Hey,
9-2. So that means this week they've gotten what I thought was punked against the New Jersey Devils and got pushed around all over the place, and then basically just slapped at home last night to the worst loss in franchise history at home. What did you make of what we've seen from the Nashville Predators this week?
Well, I'm going to kind of cut this into two separate yet equally horrific losses, but. The Dallas game last night, me and my buddy went to the game, and I said, hey, before we go to the seats, because I don't want to sound unpatriotic, but, the whole process of, the national anthem and, Nash coming out onto the ice.
There we go.
That just takes so long before the game. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, so if we leave when they start to sing the anthem to get to the seats, we should be in the seats. When they dropped the puck. Well, I guess ESPN was speeding everybody up a little bit last night. And so when we got to it was already 1-0. I said, oh, my God, what happened? They scored in the first 25 seconds. And then all of a sudden, I just look down and I just keep seeing, open nets, and I keep seeing the puck going in them. And next thing you know, it's 4-5-0. I mean, we didn't even stay for the third period. It was awful last night. And then, the New Jersey game, I thought that, it was close. And it's frustrating for me when they get into the third period with a lead and they lose, because I'm like, those are 2 points that they could have had. But Barry Trotz said on the show Tuesday that, this team was going to tell all of us, including him, what he should do at the deadline, right? He's like, if they, show us that they can compete, then they can be buyers, and I will help this team win. If they show all of us that they can't, well, then he's going to have to go the other direction. And I think that these last two games have not, officially sealed their fate. But I think it's pretty obvious that the Predators are what they are, which is an offensively challenged team that is in the middle of a rebuild. And I don't think at any point in the middle of a rebuild is there an option to buy around the trade deadline. And I think they're making that easy for Barry Trotz and for all of us. So, it's almost like the Predators have decided, hey, we're going to tell you who we are right now so that there is no misconception about where this team lies as far as competition is concerned. I heard McDonough and Yossi after the game talking about, the next game on Saturday's biggest game of the season. It might be, but I think it's one of those things where I would say, hey, we're rooting for you, but we're also looking on the other end saying, hey, right now things are not going in the direction that you guys really want them to go.
Well, last night's the type of game that gets somebody traded, right? Last night's the type of game that I think starts to really inform your decision if you're Barry Trotz. And look, I said yesterday on the show, and I've said it kind of dating back to last summer, I would trade UC Saros. I would look into trading UC Saros pretty heavily if I was the Nashville Predators. Do you agree with that? Would you do that this deadline if you're Barry Trotz?
One of the two goalies has to go. There is not enough. There's not, I love Willie with all my heart. I was listening to the Midday Show yesterday, and Willie was talking about a scenario in which the Predators extend Saros and then pass the torch from Saros to Askarov. And I'm like,
can't do it.
That's not going to happen. I'm like, there's not enough room in the town for the two of us. This is just – and so I am convinced one of the two goalies is going to be used to help bolster the offense one way or another. And so I think Saros probably makes the most sense, since when it comes to adding offense big picture, that's going to cost money. And retaining Saros long-term is going to cost money, and Askarov won't. And usually, I think in all sports, almost 9 times out of 10, if it's the veteran guy versus the young guy and the team has to make a choice, who do they always pick?
Yeah, you're exactly right.
They always pick the young guy.
Exactly.
Now, to your point about somebody getting traded from last night, I mean, I texted you that quote from Andrew Burnett about, we need to stop worrying about our vacations and we need to focus on hockey. That had to be a call out at somebody. That was not a message of the group talking about their vacations. To me, I heard that and I'm like, he's calling somebody out. So to your point.
Somebody or somebody's, yeah.
I mean, I don't think, it could be like a group of 3, but there's no way he's talking about the entire group of the entire team sitting there talking about their vacations. That was pointed, and I do wonder what that's about.
The thing about trading Saros now, and it would probably be complicated to do before the deadline, which is why a lot of people think it might happen leading into the draft than it would leading into the trade deadline, is at this point – you're selling low on Saros, in my opinion, because he hasn't been good. Now, you can hope that the body of work overall over the past few years is what people are enticed by, but the numbers this year have not been good. So is it worth trying to to trade him in the next 3 weeks, knowing that you're probably selling low on him, or is it better to basically say, we'll just handle this in the summertime when people think he's getting a fresh start and he'll be in a contract year and he'll want to impress? I mean, do you feel like that's a sound way to go about this?
So I don't know if you guys heard this, but Caroline asked Elliott yesterday about, does the price go down if you wait until the summer?
Yeah.
And Elliott gave like a 3-minute long answer, and I'm not totally sure exactly what he said. Like, I listened to the whole thing, and I heard it, and then they returned from break on the same cut, like the same Q&A between Caroline and Elliott yesterday, and I'm still not totally sure because he starts talking about leverage going to the player, and I'm like, leverage to the player? I don't care about the player. This is a team-to-team trade. But I guess I surmise out of that incredibly long diatribe from Elliott that the price would go down. When he says that there's more leverage to the player, I think now all of a sudden it becomes, hey, these are the teams Saros wants to go to, and these are the teams that Saros doesn't want to go to, and it might limit the market with which the Predators could operate with. Plus, I think there's that, kind of the old discussion of you're getting 2 playoff runs out of them as opposed to 1 playoff run out of them if you end up dealing for him in the summer. So I am a little torn here, right? Like, because, okay, if he plays better, maybe that ups his value a little bit, but there's also more teams that would fancy themselves as contenders before the start of next year than there would be at the deadline this year, but a team is paying for 2 playoff runs with him as opposed to 1, so I couldn't tell you when the right time to sell would be compared to now or then, and I think that's the risk that they have to be willing to take either way.
I'm looking at the playoff standings. I'm looking at the teams that are in playoff spots right now. And maybe I can come up with a handful of teams that could need goaltending.
Sure.
Carolina could use a goaltender. LA could use a goaltender. Dallas is fine, Colorado's fine, Winnipeg's fine, Vancouver, Vegas, Edmonton. Yeah, really, I mean, New Jersey's right underneath, but if you want to include them, that's fine. So I'm looking at you're looking at least 3 teams, right? You're looking at Carolina. Toronto maybe.
Yep.
Because they don't want to screw up there. But yeah,
they don't have any money.
Yeah.
So I think that there's 2 teams that are going to want Saros, right? There's the teams that literally have no goalie, like L.A. or New Jersey, that would want him. I mean, somebody said to me yesterday, they go, "Is David Rittich the starting goalie for the L.A. Kings?"
He currently is right now.
I was like,
yes.
They were like, "Is he a starting goalie now?" I said, "Well, it's kind of like how Dylan Radins is a starting right tackle for the Titans. Like,
yes.
He's your starting right tackle, but he is not a starting right tackle."
Correct.
So they don't have a goalie. But my thing is, those are the teams that don't have goalies. Then there's the general managers who might get fired. And the only reason I use them is because that is I believe a team that is most ripe to take advantage of at a trade deadline is a team that has a general manager who might get fired.
And the Kings are in that spot because they've been tumbling down the standings. They just fired their coach, and the pressure is on Rob Blake to get this team into the playoffs and actually do something. So to your point, Jared, the Kings are exactly in the spot that you're talking about.
Yes, because what does he care about first-round picks if he's not going to be making them?
Right.
And so that the problem is, though, is that the guys that I think Barry wants and the guys that I want the Predators to acquire are guys that are already in the NHL that are 22 years old, and teams usually don't like parting with those players because they need them right now, just like I want them right now, and that's what makes this incredibly complicated. I think if the Predators were looking to pull off a deal like they did last year, say the Ekholm deal, although I would want a little bit more maybe for Saros, if they were looking to pull off that kind of deal, I think they could get it, right? A young prospect, a handful of picks, I think they could get that. The problem is that I want the young prospect who is at the NHL level, and these teams, like what's the kid in L.A., Quentin
Byfield.
Yeah, like they need him. And so it's like they're not just going to give him up, and those are the kind of players that I think that need to be targeted for the Predators, guys that they can acquire right now, that they can have for the next 5 years at least on their team, who are 22, 21, 23 years old, and then will be a part of this top six group and can actually put the puck in the net, because that's the biggest problem the Predators have right now is they have no offense.
Jared, last thing for you here. There's one part of this week that really bothers me as the more I think about it. And look, we all know how good Ryan O'Reilly's been, and Ryan McDonough is a Stanley Cup champion and all these things. But we were told over the summer, right? We're bringing in O'Reilly, we're bringing in Nyquist, we're bringing in Luke Schenn, like the serial winners, and we're getting the locker room right. And then we have this week where everybody after both of these games have admitted, like they haven't been ready to play, they've been soft, they've not been willing to do the things that it takes to win games. And that just feels like a big disconnect to me. We're supposed to be, changing the locker room here, and we got 2 games in a row now where basically after the game your captain is admitting that they're just complete no-shows. Like how do those two things happen? How do you reconcile that difference there?
I don't know, because I thought yesterday when I saw the comments from Andrew Burnett, and like the Predators after every game, the Predators PR department, and I know you guys get them, or at least I know Robby does. I don't know if Adam still gets these emails, but they send out like the interview files.
Yeah.
And I got to be honest, I almost never click them, right? Because we cut up all the stuff in the back, and if there's anything I really want to hear, it gets sent. But last night I literally clicked them because I wanted to hear what Andrew Burnett had to say when I saw the quote about vacations and worrying about our vacations. And I was like, I got to hear this quote. And it was, as is written in context, it was the exact same as to what he said. Again, it was a call out. And I'm thinking about this and I'm like, man, this is a first-year coach. Like, this isn't like this is a sixth-year guy and maybe his voice is running, thin in the room because they've heard from him enough. And this is a first-year coach. Something's not right here. And again, like I said, I think that is a call out of either one guy or, to your point, Robby, like maybe 3 or 4 guys. And I don't know, like if you're in that spot and it's these 3 or 4 guys that are too busy talking about how they got to go to Turks and Caicos last week, you may have to send those guys on down because, or to your point, you may have to trade somebody because that seemed incredibly pointed in its criticisms. And I don't think that, like, yes, they wanted the serial winners to help out the young guys. Like, if somebody is not focused on hockey, I don't think that Ryan O'Reilly is going to get them to focus on it. But I would also caution everybody that the Predators did get rid of Kevin Fiala because he had an attitude that people didn't like, and Fiala puts the puck in the net, which is the one thing that people around here are struggling to do right now.
Jared, thanks for being with us this morning. 9 to 11 today for you, so we'll be listening here in a couple hours.
Sounds good, guys. Adam, always good to talk to you, bud.
You too, Jared.
Jared Stillman joins us every Friday morning at 7 o'clock here on the program.
My biggest takeaway from that, Jared Stillman hates America.
Well, yes, thank you. We'll discuss more.
Won't stand for the national anthem.
We'll discuss deadline. Who's going to be sold? Who's not going to be sold? Do you think they should sell? We'll take your thoughts on all that. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
the lack of a response after an effort you guys didn't like Tuesday night concerning at all?
Yeah, a little bit, I think. I mean, like we didn't like our effort on Tuesday. We got outplayed. And then tonight, first period, I mean, I don't know, it's like 18-0 shots or something, 18-1. Like we could have been down, I don't know, 6-0. Left two out to dry the whole period. And that's definitely concerning. We got to find a way. I mean, I got to be way better in the first. Starts with us leaders. We got to find a way to get the team going and to just play better. And as a team, we got to find a way. I mean, after a game like Tuesday where nobody's happy, you got to find a way to respond.
As Roman Yossi after the game last night, Preds lose 9-2 to the Dallas Stars. We're taking your thoughts on that. 615-737-1025. I got some tickets to give away. 2 courtside tickets to see Belmont women's basketball take on Drake tomorrow. Be caller number 3, 615-737-1025. Our phone number, 615-737-1025. Caller 3 will win 2 courtside tickets to see Belmont women's basketball take on Drake coming up tomorrow. 615-737-1025. Yossi talking about in that clip there, you had the stinker on Tuesday. And look, the score was close Tuesday, 4-2. That game was not that close. I mean, they got pushed up and down the ice against the New Jersey Devils. And you're hoping after a game like that there's a response. And that's what I keep going back to. Like, how does a game like Tuesday night happen where to a man everybody in there is talking about how they got basically punked and pushed around and lost every puck battle and all those things? How do you come out last night and in the first period after a game like that you get outshot 18-1 and lose 4-0? Now, full disclosure, I completely realize that the Dallas Stars are a better hockey team than the Nashville Predators, okay? So let's go ahead and make that clear. And I know, Lance on the text line has correctly pointed out that the Predators have split the season series with the Stars 4 points apiece. So that is important information to know. But we all know the Dallas Stars, as currently constructed, are a better hockey team than the Predators. So that certainly factors into what we saw, at least some last night, but nobody's that bad. Like, nobody's as bad as the Predators were last night on a consistent basis.
Well, the Stars have handed the Predators their 2 biggest gut punch losses of the season.
In 2 completely different ways.
Yes, last night and then the game right before Christmas where they blew the lead with, 10 seconds left?
13 seconds, yep.
Right, so, it could the season series could be even, but the losses that the Predators have suffered to the Stars have been bad and 2 completely different ways. You would think after the way they played against New Jersey that they would be more motivated to play better against the Stars, and that just wasn't the case. And you look at this road trip coming up, it's definitely not easy. St. Louis has been playing really well. They've won 8 of 10. They won last night against the Oilers, which has not been easy to do over the past few months. The Oilers have been on a complete roll. Then they go to Vegas, where they've already lost this season. And Vegas, of course, a good team. You have a desperate Kings team that you have to play. And then you have what you would think are 2 gimme games against the Sharks and the Ducks. But at this point, you can't believe in the concept of a gimme game based on the way the Predators have been playing.
For sure.
It would not shock me if they lost one of those 2 games to those 2 teams. Maybe I'll have my called shot at Mikael Granlund hat trick against the Predators against San Jose. Who knows? You'll have to listen and find out. But yeah, as I said at the top of the show, they're 3-7-1 in their past 11 games. I think if my math is right, they had that stretch where they went 13-3, and everyone was feeling great. Since that stretch ended, I believe they're 8-10-2.
Yeah.
So they've lost 12 of 20 since that stretch. And that seems more in line with what this team actually is, an under 500 hockey team. So, we're going to talk about the deadline a lot over the next couple of weeks because the Predators at this rate are going to sell. Exactly what they're going to sell, who knows? Because there aren't, as I said earlier, the assets that they have to sell are not as, in my opinion, as enticing as the ones they had last year. They don't have Matthias Ekholm. They don't have Tanner Jeannot. They don't have Nino Niederreiter. What is someone going to pay to get Alex Carrier? What is someone going to pay to get Tyson Barrie? There might be a player that I'm missing. So I think even if the Predators do sell off assets, I think the returns are going to be underwhelming because the players that they have are not as name brand as the ones they had last season at this time.
615-737-1025, our phone number. We'll get more into the trade part of this coming up next. Take your thoughts on the Preds on our phone and text lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Again, 2 courtside tickets to give away to see Belmont women's basketball take on Drake. Caller number 3, 615-737-1025 is our phone number. More on the Predators coming up next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Taking your thoughts on the Preds, 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Robbie Stanley, Adam Vingan, Nick Keyser here with you on this Friday morning. Let's go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in Steve in Franklin, Kentucky. Steve, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I heard on one of the other shows earlier in the season that the addition of Nyquist and O'Reilly would more than make up for the loss of Matt Duchene, and I have not. There is no way I've seen that. I think letting him go was a horrible decision. I think they just mortgaged the season. And he did Barry Trotz did a disservice to the fans and the team by getting rid of Matt Duchene. This team has no scoring punch. They very rarely score more than 3 goals in any game. And this road trip coming up, if they don't win 4 out of 5, I'd say that's going to be the final nail in the season. Thanks.
Thanks for the call, Steve. Appreciate it. I mean, we talked about the Duchene part of this a little bit earlier. Now, one thing to keep in mind, like Ryan O'Reilly has been very good. He's been very good for the Predators.
I was wrong about Ryan O'Reilly when we talked about it when he first signed. I was incredibly skeptical that he could be an effective first-line center at this stage of his career, and I was wrong about that. He's been really good. But the problem is that line is the only one that's consistently scoring. And therein lies the problem. And I understand why, looking at what Matt Duchene did last night, looking at what Matt Duchene has done this season and saying, well, the Predators were wrong about that. I think Jared mentioned this yesterday. Like, if you're playing fantasy hockey, then yes, that makes sense. But there was more to that decision than just we need to save money.
Right.
So I think, you have to. You're swallowing a bitter pill right now because you're looking at what Matt Duchene is doing in Dallas and saying, man, if only we had him still, maybe he could be doing that. The other question is, if Matt Duchene, I presume that if Matt Duchene were still here, he'd be playing with Forsberg and O'Reilly.
I would think so.
So, would he be putting up the same numbers? Nyquist has had a better season than I thought he would have.
I agree.
Would he be
starting to hit a wall a little bit, but yeah.
Would Duchene be having the same season? Not play. Are Forsberg and O'Reilly more talented line mates than Mason Marchment and Tyler Seguin? Probably, but there's more to it than just that.
Well, and Duchene's playing down the middle in Dallas too, which is more of his natural position.
I think he played. I feel like he played wing to start. I feel
he
like
did. To start, he did.
Yeah, Seguin was in center. He was at wing. Now they've switched it around. Yeah.
Yeah. So, look, certainly, as we talked about earlier, Matt Duchene has 52 points in 53 games, so he looks pretty good this year. And as we talked about when he signed, I think where he's at is a great fit for him. Look, I picked that team to win the Stanley Cup before the year began, so I feel pretty good about it. I feel good about it. They're a really good team, and there's not many weaknesses that they have, especially when they're healthy. So I think he's joined a really good spot here. From the Predators front now, in the aftermath of trying to lick your wounds and move on from a 9-2 drubbing last night, I said it with Jared. Last night does kind of feel like a game where it's like it was so dramatic in terms of how bad it was that it does feel like one of those games where something changes. And, I don't know that's immediately. And, people keep asking about the coach. It's not going to be the coach. We're less than a year into Andrew Burnett's tenure here. So, to me, if the coach is – if people ask about losing the room, if they've lost the room 55 games into a season, that's probably more on your room than it is the coach at that point. But I digress. So – now what happens from here? As you brought up, I agree. I don't think there's quite as many attractive options to sell as there was a year ago. Now, having said that, there doesn't have to be. You don't have to sell majorly this year. You just sell and continue to stockpile some assets. But the one I've been consistent on, I think it's time for Saros. And I would be heavily exploring that over the next couple weeks if I'm Barry Trotz, whether it's with New Jersey, Carolina, as you brought up, maybe L.A. And I'm with you. I think we all know, especially, retrospect being what it is, but I think we talked about this at the time. If you were ever going to maximize what you were going to get for UC Saros, then the time was probably to do that was probably either last trade deadline or last offseason.
I think it had to be in the summer.
Because he played great again last year. He had 2 years left on his deal at that point. So you had 2 years left at a great price a great cap hit for an elite goalie. So now he's eligible for a contract extension on July 1st. If you traded him now, a team would have this postseason run and another year left for him. So I still think you could get pretty good value for him, but certainly not as much as you could in the summer a year ago. I talked about this a little bit yesterday, Adam. To me, it's about the value that you can get back for him. I don't love the idea of paying a goaltender $8.5 million. I just don't love that idea right now if you're the Predators. And the other part of this is Askarov looks great right now. Like, Askarov has played really well in the American Hockey League all season. And I know it's the American Hockey League, and there's a difference between the AHL and the NHL. And it's yet to be determined if Askarov can do it at this level. But I've seen enough that makes me think that he's probably going to be pretty good at the NHL level.
Yeah, I feel like goalies in the NHL are similar to running backs in the NFL in the sense that if you have a really, really good one, that's great. Like, if you have Christian McCaffrey, that's awesome. Like, he's great.
Yeah.
But only so many teams have them, and you don't necessarily need that type of running back to win. Same thing with goalies. Like, the Winnipeg Jets have Connor Hellebuck. The New York Islanders have Ilya Sorokin. The Vancouver Canucks have Thatcher Demko, who's playing really well. But, one point that's been made a lot, and it was made a lot after the Vegas Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup last season, was, do you really need to invest that much in your goaltending when the past two Stanley Cup champions have had Adin Hill and Darcy Kemper in the lineup? And you can even go back further than that. Like, you can go back to Matt Murray in Pittsburgh. You could go back to Braden Holtby in Washington.
Tim Thomas.
You could go back to even Jordan Binnington. I mean, Binnington played
Niemi, Chicago.
Yeah, like it's like there are exceptions. Look, the Tampa Bay Lightning won consecutive Stanley Cup championships. They had Andrei Vasilevsky in there, and he's a stud. But you don't need that type of goaltender necessarily to win. So, I think that if you can get some valuable assets for UC Saros, and it's reminiscent, to use another cross metaphors again. I'm thinking about what the Chicago Bears are going through right now with the top pick. Do you keep Justin Fields and trade the number one pick, or do you use a quarterback on that number one pick and then move Fields? Well, it's the same sort of thing. Do you want to sign UC Saros to an 8-year, $8.5 million contract, or do you want to start the clock again with a goaltender on an entry-level contract and use those savings to make your team better? And that's what I think the Predators should do.
Well, Barry Trotz was pretty clear heading into the season, and we've talked about this with Rexrode of, like, he wanted to sign UC Saros to a long-term deal. And I just wonder, has that changed? Like, how much has the willingness to actually pull the trigger and make the trade change? Because I think one thing to keep in mind, like when general managers talk this time of year, and look, Trotz, to his credit, has been pretty open about his discussions, and he mentioned this week that he's had conversations with UC Saros about, look, if somebody knocks my socks off, I might do it. But I think you also have to keep in mind that this time of year there's a lot of posturing that goes on, and there's a lot of leverage and negotiations and trying to, if you're the Predators, you don't want to seem like you're desperate to trade UC Saros, and nor do I believe that the Predators are desperate to trade UC Saros. You're dealing from a position of strength in terms of you don't have to trade him, and you do have another goalie option available to you in your pipeline. So it's not like there's pressure on the Predators to do something right now at the deadline. So maybe that helps you when it comes to, your goal is, if you're Barry Trotz, to generate the best offer possible and get people in a bidding war with each other. Now, will that happen? And as Elliot Friedman pointed out on our midday show with Caroline, Willie, and D-Mace yesterday, there are a couple goalies that are out there, right? Like Markstrom is available. It looked like Markstrom apparently was almost traded to New Jersey last week before that thing fell through. So how much does that factor into the Saros part of this as well, of other goalies being out there and available on the market?
Yeah, that's a good point. Markstrom has had a bounce back year. I'm trying to think of some of the other goalies out there. Jake Allen.
Yep.
The Montreal Canadiens have a couple of goalies that they could look to move. It's just you don't see big goalie trades. It's not something you see a lot. And I think right now, I think it's past time to trade UC Saros. I just think that, as I was saying when we were talking with Jared, you're buying low. You're selling low, excuse me, on UC Saros right now because he hasn't been good. Like, you can hope, you could try to convince him, like, yeah, you know.
But is that going to change in the summer? Like, is that going to – are you going to be selling much higher than you would be right now in the summer based on his contract?
That's a good question. I mean, that is a good question. You could hope that if you, like, for example, like Carolina is an excellent defensive team. And you can hope that, hey, if we put UC Saros behind our defense, he can be better. He won't face as many tough shots. He can get his confidence back. I mean, I guess in that respect, you could sell someone like Carolina, for example. I mean, even LA, despite how bad they've been, have a reputation of being a great defensive team. It hasn't been looking like that lately, but you know, I think of last year the Kings traded for Eunice Korpisalo. And Korpisalo's not that great of a goalie.
No.
You know, he's not being great in Ottawa this season. He wasn't particularly great in Columbus, but he looked really good behind that Kings defense last year. So maybe if you're a top defensive team that just needs extra goalie, maybe to your point, Robbie, that you can convince yourself like, hey, if we get him off of that team and put him behind our defense, he can be better.
Yeah, maybe so. Tune in to 94.9 The Fan tomorrow night as Vanderbilt men's basketball takes on Tennessee on the road. Pre-game at 4:30, tip-off at 5 o'clock, with coverage also available on the 94.9 The Fan app and at 94.9thefan.com. Coming up next, it's time for the rant. Adam Vingan stepping in line today, and he's got a rant for us. I'm looking forward to that. Coming up next, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Don't make me angry.
Sometimes you have to tell someone to pound sand.
You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
This is the Rob Rant. Now on Robby and Rexrode.
You're the one who told me I could do anything if I just put my mind to it.
Well, now that you're a little bit older, I can tell you that's a crock. No matter how good you are at something, there's always about 1 million people better than you.
Gotcha. Can't win, don't try.
It is that time of the day, time for the Rob Rant, the Rex Rant, but it's being hijacked today by Adam Vinkin. So,
it's not been hijacked.
Vinkin's vitriol, is that what we named it earlier in the summer?
You offered it. You offered
I
up
did
the
offer
rant. I did not hijack the rant.
It was freely given.
Thank you. But I'll keep it short because I'd love to get some reaction to this.
Okay.
One of the great pleasures I have in life, one of the little pleasures I have in life is I like to go out for lunch.
Okay.
Who doesn't like to go out for lunch, right? Everyone loves to go out for lunch. I don't go out for lunch often, but every now and then I like to go out for lunch. And I was thinking about this the other day. If you are at an eating establishment, and it doesn't have to be lunch, it can be breakfast or dinner, but if you're at an eating establishment where you have to place an order at the counter.
Okay.
So it's not a place where you sit down and you have servers. You order at the counter, then you sit down, then you get your food. If there is a line while you're waiting to place your order, you better know when you get to the front of the line what you're ordering. You better use that time in the line to figure out what you want to eat.
Amen.
None of this walking up to the counter when you're like fifth in line and you're like, I guess no, you better know. You better know because, look, no one likes to wait in line. Waiting in line stinks. I heard about your experience waiting in line in Orlando and screaming at people trying to cut the line. Now,
that did happen.
This is an extreme example. No one is waiting in line for something to eat like they're waiting in line to get into Universal Studios. I hope not. I guess if you're going to the Hattie B's across the street from Bridgestone Arena, you might, because that line is always wraps around the corner. But if you're in line to place an order, you better know. Like, I know you want to look at your phone, you want to catch up on email, you want to see what's going on Twitter. You can do that. But you better know what you're ordering first before you do that. Because if you get to the front of the line and you don't know what you want and you're looking at, like if you're at a sandwich place and you don't know what kind of bread you want or you don't know what kind of cold cuts you want, you're making it worse for everybody else. So all I'm saying is if you're going to wait in line, you better know what you want. That's it.
Amen. No, I feel like this is a pretty big problem in our country. And this happens in the drive-thru too, which is really the one that drives me nuts because like people like drive up. And I would assume like for the most part, if you're going to a place that has a drive-thru,
you've been there before.
Probably been there before, right? Like, I mean, it's probably not your first time going to that establishment. And like the pulling up and getting to the drive-thru speaker, especially when there's been like a line where you've had to wait for a few minutes and you get up and it's like, hey, can I take your order? Can you give me a minute? Let me just hold on just a second. Let me figure it out. It's like, well, what have you been doing for the last 5 minutes as we've all been sitting here? Like it drives me nuts. And I will say, my wife, sometimes an offender of this rule. Sometimes we get to a place, she's like, I just don't know. I don't know what it's going to be. Like, Heather, we've been to this place 355 times. Like, I don't even have to think. I just know. I know what I'm going to get at this point. So I'm with you. It's very simple, too. If you take some time to decide what it is what you want, that's fine. Just don't step in line. Like, don't get into the line until you know what you want.
I feel like there are places, and I feel like the first time I ever saw this was at one of the famous cheesesteak places in Philadelphia, where like it says on the sign, like if you don't know what you want when you get to the front, you go to the back of the line.
That's right.
And if I owned an eating establishment, that would be it. I would have a shot clock. I would have, I don't know what it would set it at. Maybe more than 24 seconds. Maybe it'd have 30 seconds, like a pitch clock or whatever, and be like, all right, you've got 30 seconds to get this order. Like if you don't have to finish it in 30 seconds, but you better be pretty much done with it in 30 seconds. Yeah. And if it doesn't, you go to the back of the line and you think about what you want. And maybe that would,
an incentive.
Yeah, it'd be an incentive. Like you don't want if I have a popular
public shame.
Yeah, if I have a popular eating establishment, you don't want to have to go to the back of the line because you didn't know what you want. So if you get to the front of the line, you better know what you want. And I agree. At the drive-thru, if you go to a fast food restaurant, you've been there countless times, you probably know what you want. And I get it. Sometimes it's a last-second decision. You're like, do I want A or B? And I don't know.
But have some options in your head.
Yes. And then sometimes you have to guess. You're like, all right, fine, I guess I'll have A. But you have to know. Don't peruse the menu. Look at it on your phone if you have to. Yes, don't waste everybody's time when you're waiting in line already.
Neil on the text line says, truth happened to me at Edley's the other day on Valentine's Day. The menu is on the freaking wall. You know how much you're spending? Let's move it along and order the damn food. This is from Neil on the text line.
Right. Like, and actually,
that's the other thing. Like when people have the menu right there, it's like
right.
You can actually walk up and look at the menu before you get in the line.
Well, since he brought up Edley's, I went to Edley's. My parents are in town. We went to Edley's the other day on Wednesday. And when we went early because, we have a child, so you have to go early. And, my parents were looking at what to order, but there was nobody in line behind us.
Yeah.
So if there was nobody in line behind us, you can take that time. But yes.
Be cognizant.
The Edley's I went to in East Nashville, I mean, I'm sure it's like this in every Edley's, gigantic menu. So you better know.
It's right there for you.
You better know. That's all I'm saying.
Kevin in Nashville says, how about the people at an ice cream shop? They try like 5 different flavors. It's unbelievable. That does drive me a little bit. Hey, can I sample that? You mind if I take a quick sample of that flavor there? You get two samples max before you get out of the way. You don't sit there and sample every ice cream that they have before you make a decision.
Well, I feel like
2 samples max.
I feel like some ice cream places have like a sample limit. Like you can try 3 flavors because they know that one, they need to hold up the line. But 2, you could just keep sampling ice cream. You're like, no, I'm good. I'm stuffed.
What? I feel good.
I'm stuffed. But yeah, no, that's a good one too. Like, it's just the indecisiveness. You got to know.
You got to know.
You got to know.
And I feel like, the first off, Brendan Franklin says, no drive-through for you. Come back in 1 year. That's the new punishment.
Yes.
If you get to the drive-through and you can't make your order in time. I just feel like it goes back to the same theme, right? Whether it's the line that you're talking about at the food place, people cutting me at Universal where I have to yell all over them. It's common courtesy. It's what it comes back to. Consider your fellow man, your fellow woman out there. Common courtesy. That's what all these rants eventually come back to.
Yes. And unfortunately, not everybody has common courtesy. But, don't be that guy or gal who holds up the line that's already long because you didn't take the time to think about what you wanted before you got up.
I feel like I'm going to start noticing this happening more than I do at the moment. Now that Vingan's brought it up.
It's going to be heightened now.
Yeah.
You're going to be thinking about it. The people listening to this are going to be thinking about that. When you go to lunch today and you really want that sandwich and the person in front of you is hemming and hawing and don't know what they want, I give you permission to loudly sigh at them. Just go, like make it known
what
that
are
you're
you doing?
Make it known that you're angry. Let them know.
You know who I feel like does this? Rexrode. I feel like Rexrode could be a potential offender of this. Just getting up to the counter like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know why I feel that way.
Well,
but
let me ask you this question. When you're going out to a nice dinner,
yeah,
are you the person that, because my wife and I are like this, where you look at the menu beforehand, you're like, man, I think I'm going to want this or I'm going to want that?
Or sometimes, but I can usually find something on the menu within about 35 seconds. I'll do that.
I do that, Adam.
Yeah.
He's a researcher before you get there?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. I respect it.
Yeah, I feel like you've got your Cracker Barrel order on lock at this point.
Got options.
Yes.
Right. It's all about options. So, Coming up next, we'll be joined by Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter, host of Talking with TD. We'll get into all things Titans and NFL with him. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
ESPN's Teron Davenport, Talking Titans, now on Robby and Rexrode on ESPN, 102.5 The Game, and the Game Nashville app.
It is that time of the week here on Robby and Rexrode. Robbie Stanley, Adam Vingan, Nick Keyser here with you on this Friday morning. And as we do every Friday morning at 8 o'clock, we welcome in our friend Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter, host of Talking with TD to the program. TD, good morning. How are you?
Hey, good morning. What's going on?
Not a whole lot, man. Appreciate you taking time to be with us. So, TD, I was watching the press conference earlier this week, and aside from the reporters yelling at each other, which was awesome, we'll get into that a little bit later, the Denard Wilson part of this, I got to say, TD, it did not take me long to watch Denard Wilson and hear him speak to realize why people like him a whole lot. He kind of fires you up. Listen, what were your impressions of Denard Wilson, new Titans defensive coordinator, at the press conference this week?
Right, yeah, he's one of those guys that just speaks energy. You could feel it when he talks. You could see it in his mannerisms. He's a guy that clearly loves football, and I really like some of the catchphrases he was using, like obnoxious communication. I love that. And that's so important in order to avoid giving up big plays. So I think just bringing him in, that's going to help these guys. And that's what they want, right? They want somebody that can just make them better. And I think that's exactly what Denard Wilson is going to help do.
And obviously, TD, a lot of talk about the secondary as well. And you asked Denard Wilson about this at the press conference. And, one of the underrated parts of the Titans offseason, everybody's focusing in on the offense and the offensive line and skill positions and all those things, and I understand why. But how much work is required, do you think, in the secondary room this offseason for Ran Carthon and the Titans to kind of rebuild what they have back there?
Yeah, it's going to be some heavy lifting, that's for sure. You look at the free agents, right? Sean Murphy-Bunting, Christian Fulton, those guys are set to hit the market. And you look at overall how things look, it's going to be slim pickings at the top when you talk about the premier corners being available. And that's the way it usually is because that's a premium position. But if you look at some of the lower-tier free agents, the mid to lower tier, there's some guys that can be signed. So you have that, and then you have the draft. I think they're going to have opportunities to add it in draft. And in my opinion, because of how this defense is going to attack under Denard Wilson, it's going to be really important to have coverage behind it because if you blitz and you don't get home, that could be bad things in the secondary. So that coverage is going to have to be there.
Yeah, no question about that. So, TD, what were your impressions of offensive coordinator Nick Holtz?
Yeah, Nick Holtz I like what he said just about, messing with Brian Callahan. I think he understands his role. Like, he gets it. He's not going to call the plays. But it seems like he's taking it personal to be able to have input on the game plan itself. So his impact directly doesn't seem to happen as much on Sundays, but rest assured, from Monday up to Saturday, he's going to be a big part of it, and that's basically what he said. So I thought that was good he said that. I like what he said about, playing with energy and being able to dictate. Now, of course, he ceded to Callahan when I asked about that, but he did say, when it's time, they got to do what they have to do.
Teron, it's mock draft season. Plenty of mock drafts are coming out. I know you've looked through all of them. You've talked about them, and there's been a lot of talk around here, especially on this station, about what the Titans should do with their first-round draft pick, whether they should take a franchise left tackle or maybe address another need, particularly at wide receiver. I see a lot of mock drafts where either Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors could be available to the Titans at 7. Based on what you know of those two players, those two wide receivers, do you think one would fit this team better than the other?
That's a good question because they both bring different things. I think just the short-handed, downfield threat, boundary, pass-catching ability that Rome Odunze brings would be very attractive. The huge catch radius, that's something that I know would benefit Will Levis, but they're at the same time, man. Just that ability to get yards after the catch, 3 yards, turn a short pass into a big gain. That's what you get with Neighbors, that explosiveness. So I really couldn't pick one over the other. I think they both would be really good. Either one would fit into what Brian Callahan wants. So that's guys that can score touchdowns on the outside.
TD, on the Derrick Henry front, obviously we're a little less than a month away now from those decisions having to be made, and there's a ton of running backs that at the moment look like they're going to be out there and they're going to be available on the market. So how do you think the running back market affects what the price could be for Derrick Henry, and is there a team or two out there that you think could be a really good fit for Derrick Henry if it's not going to be the Titans?
Yeah, I think, if you look at a team like the Ravens, that would be a perfect fit for Derrick Henry. If I'm the Titans, I let Henry go ahead and test the market and just tell him, look, man, see what you could gather, bring it back to me. We'll match it. We know you want to be here. We'll give us a chance to match it. I think that's what the approach should be. He could definitely fit in with this team. I mean, obviously, he won't get the 25 to 30 carries a game that usually is best for him, but you saw last year, that's kind of what they got away from last year. So, and he still was second in the league in rushing, so he could still play, and that was behind that offensive line. So, you look at what Brian Callahan said, just as far as how any offense could use a player like Derrick Henry. You look at what he's done in Cincinnati, as far as going 12 personnel and sometimes running the football. There were times where Joe Mixon, he was relied upon heavily. So I definitely think he could fit, but it's just not the same fit as it once was, whereas he was the guy that everything revolved around.
TD, where do you come down on the Skoronski part of this? Jared has been talking for months, and he was talking again yesterday about moving him to left tackle potentially. And, we asked Vrabel about that throughout the season, and the Titans were never really able or willing, I guess, to move him over there. Do you think that should be a possibility? Do you think he's strictly a guard and you go draft a left tackle and that's the end of it in the draft? Where do you come down on the Skoronski part of this?
Yeah, I think you draft the left tackle. I think that is something you do. But, you consider it, but I feel as though Skoronski at guard and you draft a tackle, that left side could be pretty good. And, yes, he was an All-American in college, at left tackle. But, Tim Tebow was a Heisman winner in All-American multiple years at quarterback at Florida, and we know how that situation works out. College All-Americans don't always be outstanding NFL players. And to me, I think, there's a chance he could be moved to tackle. It just depends on how this team, this group of evaluators, how they look at the pocket, right? And we know Mike Vrabel, he was very, very critical about protecting the pocket from the inside out. Now, here's the other thing I'll tell you. You ask any quarterback, ask Drew Brees, ask Aaron Rodgers, ask the great Tom Brady, they will all tell you the thing that they hate most is having the pocket pushed back into their lap. Guess what is one of the best ways to avoid that happening? Your guard, center, guard, triangle. So investing a high pick in a guard is not a bad decision. You want guys who are going to help you play and win games. I think Skoronski at guard will help you do that. So I don't devalue that position. You know what I mean? And I do think that a left tackle can be had in this draft, whether it's at pick 7 or pick 38 or 39, wherever they are in the second round. I think they can get that left tackle there.
TD, last thing for you here. So, obviously Kevin Byard is no longer here, and there's a hole at the safety position, and certainly depth-wise at the safety position. That's something they need to take a look at. What do you think the plan should be there for the Titans? Is it something you address in the draft or free agency, or would you be comfortable going with a starting safety duo of Molden and Hooker next year? Where do you come down on that part of it?
Yeah, I think, that duo would be something to start with. I know Molden did have some struggles, but it was his first year playing safety exclusively, so see how that goes in year 2. But, nobody's talking about Kayvon Wallace. And the fact of the matter is Kayvon Wallace played under Denard Wilson with the Eagles when he was their secondary coach. And Wallace actually had a decent showing when he was with the Titans last year. A low-cost free agent, I would definitely look at bringing him back. You look at the draft, there's an abundance of safeties. As a matter of fact, I just had Malik Mustafa, a safety out of Wake Forest. I had him on talking with TD this past episode, and he's a guy that you could get on day 3, and he can come in and help you out. So there's depth there at the position. It's one of those ones where you don't have to address it in the first couple of days of the draft. You can get a solid player later.
Well, TD, great stuff as always, man. I'm looking forward to doing the show with you on Monday, so hope you have a great weekend. We'll see you bright and early on Monday morning, and tell us about our friends at ESPN Bet.
Yeah, for sure. I'm looking forward to that on Monday. We'll have to talk about this Preds game, too, man.
Oh, man.
9 goals. What the heck? I saw that live. But
rough.
Anyhow, let's move on to ESPN Bet, which is now live in Tennessee, and it's the official sportsbook of ESPN. ESPN Bet is the only place to find daily exclusives and offers with your favorite ESPN personalities and shows. If you haven't done so, sign up today, and as a new user, you get $100 in bonus bets for making any sportsbook bet. You can find all your favorite markets and bets like in-game wagering, cross-sport parlays, teasers, and all the props you can handle. That's ESPN Bet. Download today. What a play. The only thing is you must be 21 or older and in Tennessee. For gambling problems or support, call or text the TN Red Line at 800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. See the app for details.
Well, take your thoughts and reaction to what Teron Davenport had to say on our phone and text lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. 615-737-1025 is our number. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5-106.3 The Game. Tune in to 93.3 Classic Hits this Sunday for coverage of the Daytona 500. Coverage will begin at 12:30 with the race starting at 1:30. Coverage also available on the 93.3 Classic Hits app and at 93.3classichits.com. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Robbie Stanley, Adam Vengen, Nick Keyser here with you on this Friday morning. Appreciate Teron Davenport for being with us in the last segment. Taking your thoughts on the Titans. Let's go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And welcome in our buddy Mark in Nashville. Mark, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, what's going on? What's up, my guy, Adam?
Mark, good to hear from you, man.
Yeah, good to hear from the Mount Rushmore of radio talk. Adam, Robby, Joe Rexrode. Yeah, the Mount Rushmore. Good to hear from you, Adam. How
Still
y'all
on
doing?
there? Good.
Hey, Robby, you was talking about some of the needs of the Titans and stuff. I'm going to agree with everything you were saying. And what TD was saying, they're going to need needs of safety, linebacker, defensive line, especially the offensive line. I would leave Staronsky I would leave him at guard and get me a left tackle. If they can't get the tackle that they need in the first round, though, Robby, I would really consider things about trading back and try to accumulate more picks. The more picks you get, the more depth you can build. And that's something I hope they think about doing and stuff, because they have a lack of a lot of picks, and they need to accumulate more picks than what they do have and stuff. So, they have a need at everything. Molden, he's a good safety, made some mistakes, but that was his first year playing. But I would still build some depth there at safety and through the draft and stuff, and build my defensive backfield up like that. I don't think they're going to bring Fulton back, so you're going to need a good cover corner you can get out of the draft and stuff. But, hey, y'all have a good weekend. I just wanted to holler at you. I heard my guy this morning. I hadn't heard him in a while. But, hey, y'all have a good weekend. You too, Robby.
Thanks,
hey,
Mark.
Robby, I need to talk to you, man, so don't forget about me.
I won't forget about you.
All right. See y'all later,
Appreciate
Adam.
you,
Have a
buddy.
good one.
You too, Mark.
I mean, that is an interesting, I guess, decision if it presents itself that the Titans would have to make, right? So let's say you love Joe Alt and he's your guy and you want to take him at left tackle, but somebody either moves up and takes him before you, or, I don't know, like the Chargers in front of you take Joe Alt before you have a chance to. At that point, would you consider moving down and trying to accumulate more picks in the draft if you've got a partner to do so? Or do you look at the board and you say, you know what, we didn't get the tackle that we absolutely love, but there's Roma Dunze, there's Malik Neighbors, and while it's not addressing the left tackle need specifically, maybe we can do that in the second round, and right now here's a game-changing wide receiver that we can add to our group. Like, that's an interesting decision of what would you do there if you're the Titans, like the allure of getting more picks and maybe adding some more top talent that way. Personally, if it were me and it came down to that decision, I would go ahead and take the game-breaking wide receiver and not worry about more picks. That's just me.
Yeah, it's a tough situation because the Titans have a lot of holes at premium positions. You know, I understand the allure of taking Joe Alt at the top of the draft, because if he's as good as everyone says he is, and he's your left tackle and Peter Skoronski's your left guard, you know, hopefully you can set it and forget it. And those guys are on the left side of your line for the next 10 years. And you can use, you don't have to worry about that anymore, which is something the Titans have had to worry about for the past couple of years because the offensive line has been so porous. But, when I think about, what Brian Callahan can do as coach of the Titans and what the Cincinnati Bengals have shown, adding a young game-changing wide receiver, I think to me it's too enticing to pass up. Now maybe that decision gets made for you, right? Maybe Joe Alt goes before you have a chance to pick, and then it's then you can have your pick of wide receiver, whether it's Roma Dunze or Malik Neighbors or someone else. But I'm thinking about what Brian Callahan can do for Will Levis. And if you want him to have, similar weapons to what Joe Burrow had in Cincinnati, now, of course, I'm not expecting anyone to be Jamar Chase out there. But if you could have someone that, a young receiver that can grow with Will Levis and, Tyjae Spears, I think, is a big part of this as well, because Joe Mixon, in Cincinnati, not only is he really good on the ground, he's really good catching the ball out of the backfield. And if Tyjae Spears can fill a similar role where he's collecting a lot of targets, I think that can make this Titans offense a lot more dynamic and more modern than what we've seen over the past couple of years under Mike Vrabel.
Well, the bottom line is they need elite talent. They're in desperate need of elite talent.
Yes.
All across the board. And look, you could take this to the Predators discussion too. They're in need of elite talent. But that's to me why, especially if Alt is still on the board and you've got your pick of Alt and at least one of those wide receivers, you're not trading back, to me. If you got that selection, because the thought process is I'm either getting a franchise-changing left tackle, which most people believe that's what Joe Alt is, a guy that you could plug and play and can be your starter at left tackle for the next 10 years, or a receiver that can, along with DeAndre Hopkins next season, transform your passing game, hopefully. So, when you have the opportunity to choose those guys, and look, the Titans have to do their own evaluation. Maybe they don't agree that Malik Neighbors can be one of those guys. Maybe they don't agree that Joe Alt is the franchise-changing left tackle that a lot of people believe he is. But if they do, and you're picking 7th overall, this roster is in desperate need of elite talent. And when you have the 7th overall pick, you got to go get somebody that's elite and start to add to that roster.
You got to hit on that pick.
Yeah,
I mean you absolutely have to.
It's a crucial draft.
Yes, absolutely, and. I liked a lot of what I saw from Will Levis over the course of the season. I know that it was a small sample, and he came in, in the middle of the season, but I think he showed a lot of promise. Who knows if he'll be the franchise quarterback, but I think he's giving you some reason to believe he could get there. And now he's got a coach that hopefully will be here for a while. That's why I know it was important for a lot of people that the Titans hired an offensive coach. So it doesn't matter if the OC gets poached, because Brian Callahan is calling the plays and he can develop that relationship with Will Levis. So, it's the way the Titans had been doing it, a lot of Derrick Henry, a lot of play action, that did work for a little while, but it's tapered off, and I think it's time for a fresh look. So, the idea of getting that franchise left tackle and then not having to worry about that position, hopefully for the next 10 years, is really enticing. But so is going out and getting a young receiver who can become Will Levis's number one target for hopefully that long as well.
Well, and Tommy on the text line brings up another good option. He says, I think if Bowers is available, you got to take him. He'd be a huge asset for Levis. Mm-hmm. He's Kittle at blocking and Kelsey at catching. What do you guys think?
Yeah,
that's a lofty comparison, but I do think he has a chance to be really, really good at the NFL level. That's another one. If he's there, I'd certainly consider it if you're the Titans. Now, look, one of those guys is going to be gone, right? I would be very surprised if the 7th overall pick comes around and the Titans are going to have their choice between Joe Alt, Brock Bowers, Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze. If that happens, well, that's a heck of a spot to be in if you're the Titans,
right?
At that point, but I mean. Brock Bowers certainly. If the I said it before and I'll say it again. If the Titans walk out of here and Brock Bowers is their pick, it's gonna be difficult for me to be upset about that. Even though I know they need a left tackle and a wide receiver, it'd be hard for me to be upset with him taking Brock Bowers.
No, he's a really good he's a really good player, and we saw we saw in the Super Bowl on one side of the ball how important it is having a great tight end. Now, George Kittle is a great tight end. He did not have a good game in the Super Bowl, but we saw how important Kittle was to the 49ers getting to that point. So if you can find a tight end like that, because really in the NFL, I mean, how many tight, there's 3, right? Kelsey, Kittle, and maybe Mark Andrews.
At times.
Yeah, are the 3 tight ends. Definitely.
I would probably leave it Kelsey and Kittle.
Yeah, and then you could make an argument for Andrews if you want to include him in that group. But if you can find a guy like that, clearly it makes a huge difference. So, yeah, Brock Bowers would be a really solid pick for the Titans. I too, would not be upset by that if that were the pick.
Coming up next, we'll get back into the Preds. 9-2, a loss last night at the hands of the Dallas Stars. We'll discuss that. Take your reaction to that as well. 615-737-1025, our phone number. Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063, the game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. We are broadcasting live from the Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Game Nashville studios, keeping your home feeling comfortable all year round. Robbie Stanley, Adam Venya, Nick Keyser here with you on this Friday morning. The Preds got smoked last night 9-2 against the Dallas Stars, and it was ugly right from the jump. Dallas scored 35 seconds into the game, and they didn't look back. I said it to begin the show, Adam. I've seen, I'm not going to say every period of Predators hockey, but I've seen most every period of Preds hockey that they've probably ever played. And last night was the worst. That first period that they played last night was the worst one I've ever seen. And I did some digging on that. It's the sixth time in franchise history that they've given up one shot in a period. So the sixth time that has happened, and they got outscored 4-0 in the period and outshot 18-1. So when you factor in the 4-0 deficit, which, by the way, it could have been worse, the 18-1 shot differential, I think it's the worst period of hockey that they've ever played in the history of the franchise. And then you factor in the entire game. It didn't just stop in the first period. Dallas hangs up 9 goals. You get beat 9-2 on home ice 2 days after you got, in your own words, embarrassed at home with your effort and with the lack of battle level that you had against New Jersey. And to a man, Yossi talked about it in the postgame. Novak talked about it. Cody Glass. Everybody talked about the effort against New Jersey wasn't good enough. And then you follow it up with that yesterday against the Stars. It was very concerning. And to me, I said it yesterday before the game even happened, but last night kind of reiterates it. Like, if you're Barry Trotz trying to make a decision on what to do at the deadline, the decision to me is made at this point.
There's only one period I can think of that I remember that was perhaps worse than that one. Do you remember the game against the Blues at home a couple of years ago?
Oh, yeah.
Where they were, I think, outscored 7-1 in the second period?
Yeah.
I actually pulled it up right now. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They were outscored 7-1 in the second period, man.
At least they scored.
There's some interesting goal scorers in this period. Vladimir Tarasenko, Calle Rosen, Jordan Kyrou, Calle Rosen again, Nathan Walker, Braden Shen, Luke Cunnin, and Jordan Kyrou.
Yes.
7-1. It was 1-1 after 1. It was 8-2 after 2. So that's the only other period I can think of that was really that bad. But yeah, it was the game was over very, very quickly last night, and the Predators now go on a 5-game road trip that, I know we use this term a lot, that's definitely a make or break moment of their season. We did not have time for Call Your Shot Friday today, but I'll do my call shot here while we're talking about it. The Predators will not earn more than 5 out of a possible 10 points on this road trip. So they can get up to 10. I'm going to say they get no more than 5.
Is that a called shot?
I don't know. Let's ask Nick.
Verdict?
I think it is. I was going to say maybe maybe 6 points.
So they're playing St. Louis.
Yes, they're playing St. Louis.
They're
playing Vegas.
The called shot would be like they're not going to earn more than 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I don't think it's much of a shot to say they're not going to earn 6.
It's been a while, Adam.
7.
I will permiss it. I think it works.
Okay, he will permit. Is that a word?
Yeah. It is now.
Probably not.
Okay.
Anyway.
My
mediocrity of my choice of words continues. It's okay.
So,
at least you guys know my gist.
Called shot or not, I think it's not going to be a great road trip. Okay. How about this? I'll do this. They will lose in regulation to one of the Ducks or the Sharks.
Okay, that counts.
That is how about that? Included in the called shot. They will lose in regulation to
that'd be
one
a bad
of.
Breaker.
They would lose to one of the Sharks and the Ducks in regulation.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be bad. So it's rough going here, and the Predators would be wise to start. They got an early start to the deadline last year. They did not waste time. Nino Niederreiter, I believe, was the first player traded, and that was at least a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks before the deadline. It seemed it was pretty.
February 25th, I think, was when they started the trading last year.
Yeah, so we're getting around that time, and I think I think you could see Alex Carrier be moved. His name has popped up a lot. Tyson Barrie, obviously, looking for a change of scenery, and that's been known for a while. I'm wondering if there's a player that we're not expecting to be traded. Now, we talked a lot about Saros and whether or not that could work, but I'm not including him. I'm wondering if there's someone else on the team that we haven't talked about as a potential trade that could be moved. Could you see someone like Trennan be moved? Or Nyquist be moved, similar to Niederreiter last year.
Carey, yeah. I mean, look.
And who would that be?
I am with you from the standpoint of I do think there will be players, whether it's at the deadline or probably more specifically in the summer. But I do think there will be players moved that people, as we sit here today, don't expect to be moved.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think Barry Trotz, I think it's necessary. Like I think you need to continue to churn this roster, right? You need to continue to churn the roster over and to get in new blood. And, look, Philip Forsberg's not going anywhere, obviously. He's played great this year. You just brought in O'Reilly, so he's not going anywhere. Roman Yossi's got a no-movement clause, so he's not going anywhere. But, other than that, I'd be looking around and seeing who fits into what you want to do, who fits into the system that you want to run with Andrew Brunette, and who's got the approach that you want. Clearly, based on comments that Andrew Brunette has made, clearly there are still players that are in that room right now that either aren't getting it or are not approaching the game consistently with the mindset that Andrew Brunette wants, because he's talking about it in the post-game media session pretty much every game after the games now. And you start to pay attention to that after a while of, like, who exactly is he talking about? Like, what exactly – is it one guy? Is it a collection of people? Like, what exactly is going on where – apparently there's a disconnect right now.
And I admire that about Andrew Brunette. He does not hold back.
He doesn't care.
And that's a good thing, I think, when you're a coach. And look, oftentimes when coaches say things like that, the players have heard it before. Yep. Like, it's not this is not shocking to anyone in the Predators dressing room to hear those things in the public by Andrew Brunette. He's saying those things to them. So, when the Predators went through that stretch, before Christmas?
Mid-November to right around Christmas.
Yeah, when they went 13-3, you're like, oh, maybe they got something here. And really, no pun intended, it seems like it was a bit of fool's gold. I just think that this team is their record right now is reflective of, I think, the type of team we expected them to be. I just think it's disappointing in the sense that, was it worth it? I mean, it's easy to hindsight, second guess this. Was it worth it, to put a team together with the intention of competing for a playoff spot? Now, people might accuse me now of saying the Predators should tank. Well, if they wanted to tank, last year was the year to tank.
Exactly.
I'm not sure this was the year to tank. But, I have long held the belief that the Predators will not get better until they allow themselves to get worse. And taking maybe a one step back isn't what I'm talking about, because at the rate where they're going right now, they're going to pick, right where they always pick in the draft, 15, 16, 17. And that isn't to say that you couldn't find a good player there, but you're not going to find the type of player that Barry Trotz was willing to reportedly, well, I don't think it was reportedly, I think he admitted it,
yeah,
was willing to trade Yaroslav Askarov to move into the top 5. Like, you're not going to find that player at 17. So
more than likely. Yeah.
So it just feels like they're kind of spinning their wheels again. Like, I really just think that you don't need a total teardown. I don't think you need to go that far, maybe, but this team needs to be a team that's picking in the top 10.
Well, a continuation of what you did a year ago, right? Like, to continue to strip away at some roster players that you have and tear it back down. And look, with the way they're playing right now, like, don't look now, but Minnesota's right behind them in the standings. Like, they keep playing the way they played the last couple of weeks, they're going to get passed by quite a few teams coming up here.
I'd love to know. I'd have to go back and look, like, how far back the Blues were behind the Predators before they went 8-2 in their past 10 games. Like, I could look that up easily during the break, but there are teams coming up behind them that you do not want to be behind. No. Minnesota has had a rough season, and they got the new coach rub when John Hines came in, but that's worn off, and it's not been great for them lately. So, you don't want to end. I mean, I guess in some sense, maybe you do want to end up down there because it enhances your odds of getting a good pick.
Let's go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in Nate. Nate, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
What's up, guys? It's always great to see you, Adam. How you been, man?
Good. You?
Good. My question is, how concerned are you that the Preds are just going to be middling for years to come? I mean, we haven't seen anything different. We look at the Blackhawks, and it's obvious what they're doing. But my concern is they want to still stay competitive and try and retool. Investments don't always bring a return. You sometimes lose. So, I mean, right now I just don't have faith that they're really picking a direction. They're on the fence, and they need to get off.
Yep, thanks for the call, Nate. Appreciate it. We'll get more into that coming up next. Take your thoughts as well. 615-737-1025, our phone number. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063, The Game. Welcome back in. Final segment of the day. Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063 The Game. Robby Stanley, Adam Vingan, Nick Keyser here with you on this Friday morning. Preds lose 9-2 last night. Getting your reaction to that. So Nate called in asking about leveling off in mediocrity. I don't know. That's what they've been for the last 5 years. And the plan you thought last year when they started to sell off was to change that. And look, they've played really poorly for the last couple of weeks here. Kind of the last week heading into the break, and ever since they come out of the break, it's been pretty bad. So will they snap out of that and figure some things out here moving forward? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I thought that probably would have happened after the Tuesday night game, and it did not, and they got shelled last night. So I have no idea what version of the Nashville Predators is going to show up on Saturday against the St. Louis Blues. I do know there's one thing that we got to stop talking about, and I get it. It's in the aftermath of a 9-2 loss, and I understand it. So people are mad, and especially if you paid for a ticket for that game last night, I'd be upset too. But can we please stop talking about the coach losing the room 55 games in the first year of the season?
Yeah, that's one aspect of my old job I don't miss. I'm not going to lie. The overreaction. And by the way, I looked this up during the break. On January 19th, the Predators had a 7-point lead over the Blues. They're now down 4 points, so that's an 11-point swing over the past month. The Blues have gone from down 7 to up 4 on the Predators. So, yeah, I mean, it's easy to point fingers when things aren't going well and wonder if Andrew Burnett, is the right coach for this group. I think, it's way too early to tell. I mean, it's not going well. I agree with you, what you said earlier, Robby, that if these things stretch across multiple coaching staffs, it's not a coaching issue. It's a roster issue. And I think that's one thing that, we had plenty of spirited debates, near the end of John Hines' time here about is the problem John Hines or is the problem the roster he's been given? And I usually sided more on the roster than on the John Hines part. And I think that, with the fact that Andrew Burnett is having similar issues, I think it's clear that it's more of a roster construction issue.
Look, everybody wanted to blame everything on John Hines, and I get it. Like, you get to the end of his coaching tenure, and everything's his fault. It's kind of similar to what's going on with Vrabel right now with the Titans. Everything's Vrabel's fault. And it's not. Like, everything wasn't Vrabel's fault, and everything was not John Hines' fault. And I'm not saying it wasn't time to move on from John Hines, because it was. It was time to move on from John Hines and get a new direction in here from a new coaching standpoint, from a new general manager standpoint, and I think the Predators did the right thing last year. But this roster still needs to be churned over. And look, Andrew Burnett's not been perfect. I think there have been some decisions that he's made this year that have not been good. And he admitted the other day he's not always right. So it's not like he's done a fantastic job this season either. But the coach, I don't know how you can get through all this and watch what's going on here for the last 5 years and see similar things happening right now and say, well, it must be the coach. It's not the coach. No. And we're getting to the point with the roster where I do wonder if bigger moves than we've probably expected all year are coming in terms of maybe established players who have been here. Could Barry Trotz really be looking to shake this thing up, whether it's now or in the summer?
But I wonder who that would be, right? Because
Forsberg and Josi have no movement clauses.
Right, so that's
it's probably not going to be them.
And I think Ryan McDonough has some sort of trade protection in his contract. But I'm thinking, if it's not Saros, who is it? Is it Colton Sissons? Does he have value around the league? Who is that player? If a statement trade is going to be made on a player that doesn't have control over his situation, who is it going to be?
Well, and that's the thing, because they have turned over a ton of the roster, and it's not going to be Ryan O'Reilly, right? You just brought him in. So is it you getting rid of both Fabro and Carrier? Are you revamping the way your defense is constructed? Are you looking at your forward group specifically with guys like maybe a Trennan and a McCarron and trying to revamp that whole thing? Everybody keeps, we've got people in the text line talking about just bring up Joakim Kimmel, bring up all these young kids. And I get the thought process, but guys, they have to be ready to play in the NHL for you to bring them up. You can't just throw them to the wolves and expect that that's going to work out well for you in terms of their development. You'll be right back in the same situation that you're in with some of their young guys right now. They have to be ready to play in the league before you bring them into the league.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the desire to get these guys up here and see and look. I've long heard the idea of, and I've thought about it too. If the season is quote unquote lost, if you're not going to be making the playoffs, why not use this time to get some of the younger kids playing time? But you also don't want to hurt their development by throwing them in when they're not ready.
Adam, Really enjoyed having you in today, brother.
Yes, my pleasure. Hope to be back soon.
Absolutely. We'll have TD in with us on Monday. Looking forward to that. Hope everybody has a great weekend. Jared Stillman coming up next from 9 to 11. Stillman & Company, a special edition today. You're listening to 102.5, 106.3, The Game.